I didn't know you wanted me to talk, Commissioner.
That's what you're here for.
This is big. This is big. I didn't know I was gonna have to talk. Oh boy. Oh, this makes me nervous. You know, I felt all along that he kind of favored Matlock a little bit. Folks, normally when I speak out in the crowd, I get awful nervous. I think it stems from the fact that I had an uncle one time. He was standing out on this stage out in front of a big crowd of people, and he slipped, and he fell down through a hole in the middle of that stage. We all believe he'd have broke both of his legs if it hadn't been for that rope around his neck. No, actually, I'm really glad to see everybody this morning. I'm glad to see some smiles, because that same uncle I was telling you about, he worked over at the paint factory up there in Mayberry, and I got a letter from him last week, said there'd been an accident over there. What happened was, he was climbing up a ladder over there at the paint factory, and he got to the top of it, and somehow he slipped, and he fell head first off that ladder down into a big vat full of varnish. Couldn't swim. And he drowned it in that varnish, and the letter they sent me said that it was a terrible death, but it was a beautiful finish. Did you get that all right, buddy? Now, folks, normally when I speak out in a crowd like this, somebody will usually ask me how I got into the lawman game. Thank you, buddy. I appreciate it. I do appreciate it. Well, it kind of goes like this, see? Me and Thelma Lou. She says to me, she says, Barney, why don't you go over and talk to Andy and see if he'll let you be his deputy? I says, all right. So I went over there and I says, Ange, how's about me being your deputy? He says, Barney, that'd be fine. He says, but first, you've got to pass a test. He says, it's simple. It's only got one question. I says, what's that? He says, the question is, who shot Abraham Lincoln? I says, Andy, could I have overnight to think about it? He says, yeah, go on home and think about it. So that next night, me and Thelma Lou, we're sitting back over there at the snappy lunch, eating supper, and she says to me, she says, Barney, did you get that job as a deputy? I says, yeah, I think so. Andy's already got me working on a case. Working on a case. Hey, you know what, folks? You remember Mr. Schwartz? Well, look at there, it's Opie. Stand up and wave at him, Opie. Look at that. Look at there. Don't he look good? You know what precocious means, right? Yeah, smart little boy. Smart. Him and Andy were sitting in church one Sunday morning, and Andy had given him a $1 bill, you know, to put in the offering plate. Well, about halfway through the church service, here come that plate through the pew, and Opie took it and just passed it right on over to Aunt B, and off it went. When that church service was over, Opie kind of fished his way through the crowd there, and he found the preacher standing there, took that preacher's hand and laid that crumpled up $1 bill out in it, and the preacher looked at it. He says, why, Opie, he says, I appreciate that. He says, but tell me something. He says, didn't that offering plate come through your pew about halfway through the church service? Opie looked up at him and says, yeah, preacher, it did. He says, but I wanted to put that $1 right in your hand, because my pa says you're the poorest preacher we ever had. But talking about Mr. Schwump, he had to wear one of them there, toupee. Well, he lost his toupee, and he had to order one out of a catalog. Well, it come in about 2 weeks, you know, it's all wrapped up in this box, brown paper all around it, and Mr. Schwump, he tore that brown paper off there, and he looked at it, it said, 100% cat hair toupee. Well, he took the lid off of that box, and he took that toupee out of there, and he laid it right down there on his head. You kind of like that, don't you, buddy? Yeah. Well, that old toupee looked so pretty just laying there, but it had one little problem with it. Every time somebody rubbed his head, he'd arch his back. He kind of favors Otis, actually, is who he looks like. But I really do appreciate that. It's I wanted to introduce you to Mr. Schwump because Mr. Schwump was, he was one of the most important citizens of Mayberry, North Carolina. He was the oldest living resident of Mayberry, North Carolina up until last week. Well, last week in his sleep, it's kind of a sad story, but it's going to happen to each and every one of us. In his sleep last week, he died. That's right. He passed away. Well, they fixed him up, like they'll do. They fixed him up and they laid him out in this box, And they got 6 of them boys over in Mayberry that was willing to carry him way up the hill there at the end of Main Street to the cemetery. Well, them boys got that box with Mr. Schwump in it up on their shoulders, and up that steep hill they went. Oh, I forgot to mention, it had rained real hard the night before that. Yeah, and that red dirt up there in the cemetery had got right wet, and it had turned to mud. Well, when that boy on the front of that box with Mr. Schwump in it, when his right foot hit that slick mud, he slipped and he fell down. When he fell, them other 5 boys, they lost their balance and they dropped what they had. And when that box with Mr. Schwump in it hit that steep hill, just took off like a shot. When it hit Main Street, buddy, it's doing 35 miles an hour. I'm telling you, it went all the way down the middle of Main Street and it hit the curb right there in front of the drugstore, jumped that curb, hit the double doors at the drugstore and went right on in. Went all the way back through the middle of the drugstore. And when it got to the counter in the back there, Miss Ellie, that lady druggist, you all remember her, she come running out of the back room. Well, at about the same time, the lid of that box flew open. Mr. Schwump, he rose straight up in that box. And he looked at Miss Ellie, and he says to her, you got anything to stop this coughing? Have to think about that. Y'all remember Goober Pyle, don't you? Remember Goober? Goober was sitting over to Snappy lunch there a couple of weeks ago, eating one of them pork chop sandwiches, and he said the funniest thing happened, said that he was sitting there eating his sandwich, and he looked across the aisle, and there's this man and woman sitting over there in a booth, and they're both eating a pork chop sandwich, and he said as he was looking at them, he noticed that man slid right out of his seat, right down into the floor. Well, the waitress come right over there and tapped that woman on the shoulder. She says, "Ma'am, your husband just slid down in the floor." And that woman looked up at her and says, my husband just come through the front door. Ladies and gentlemen, if I might step out of character for just a moment, I can't begin to tell you what a great pleasure it is for me to be here with you this morning. For someone who has absolutely no qualifications to be in law enforcement other than a respect for it and from childhood on standing in awe of those people who truly wear the uniform and represent the law in a professional way, I want you to know how proud I am to be here today. I usually close my program with a little poem, and I'm going to do that, but I want to hold it off for just a second. I want to share with you that in my life as a performer, I represent the Andy Griffith Show. But in my own life, I represent myself, David Browning, a husband and father of 3 children. One's getting ready to graduate college, and I'm sure he's as tense in his situation as you all were in yours. And I have a daughter that's graduating high school this year and one that's still in high school, be a junior next year. And as I travel around the country, I am fortunate because I get to be involved with all those positive people that you could deal with. Law enforcement, churches, good Mayberry reunions, and people talking about the qualities of the Andy Griffith Show. Unfortunately, the only thing we get to read about are all those negative things in the press.
people who do bad things. I'm fortunate because I get to see the positive elements in our society. And I would say this to you today, to the graduates. I am proud that I can go out in a uniform and represent law enforcement in a way that lifts people up. I think that enforcing the law should be that. We should recognize, Abraham Lincoln said one time, it was like a light bulb went on over his head, and he was a lawyer first, He said, hey, that's it. He said, that's the only real difference we need to determine in our lives is what is right and what is wrong. And if we do, then there would be no lawbreakers. People who break the law know that it's wrong. So I am proud that I can go out, lift law enforcement officers up with a little bit of laughter, because I think that is a positive element in our society that is lacking greatly. When people think that laughter is supposed to be insulting, or that I put you down and that's supposed to be funny, I think that's completely wrong. And so I'm proud that I get to go out, support law enforcement in my way. And in that way, too, I become a part of you. And I'm proud to be a part of you. And I'm so proud. When I met Commissioner Green, he said it took about 20 seconds. And it took me about 20 seconds to realize when he mentioned the word ethics, I said, I've got to get closer involved with this person, because if ethical behavior is something that's important in his life, then I know that he's passing it on to many, many people, and I want to be a part of that. And I learn a little bit more about it every time I'm around Commissioner Green, the way he carries himself, the way he approaches people, and I want to be more like that. There was one very famous person, I can't remember who he was, but he said, we become like those things that we love or that we care about. That's what we become. If we care about negative things, that's what we're going to become. And you people today have exhibited your desire to be like good things. And I appreciate you so much. And I'm so proud that I get to be here. I do want to close with the poem that I close with at every program that I do. And as you listen to it and you look around this room, you will recognize why I recite it. It not only represents the Andy Griffith Show, but it represents the greater elements of our own personalities and our own beings. It's a short poem entitled Pathways, and I'd like to share it with you. Now, when the evening shades has fallen at the close of the day, oh, and I'm just setting around, passing the time away, there's a thought that comes to cheer me if I'm feeling kind of blue. Sorta little prayer of gratitude for crossing paths with you. Now, I never had the habit of spilling a lot of bluff or indulging in mushiness and sentimental stuff, but if I like folks, I tell them. Up and tell them now instead of writing funny epitaphs about them when they're dead. So I'm sending you this message just because I want to say that I'm glad the Lord arranged it so that you could pass my way. Just to hear your voice and see you made my sky a shade more blue. I'm just a bit more blessed since crossing paths with you. And I thank you for having me here today. Thank you, Commissioner.